Hello and welcome to 10 by 9, where 9 people have up to 10 minutes each to tell a true story from their own life. I'm Paul Dorn, and this is the 10 by 9 podcast. It's lovely to be here with the first full podcast of 2026. I went through some of our brilliant live shows from last year to pull together 3 fantastic true stories, including one from a first-timer.
Somehow I managed to convince her to put on my coat. We established that her clothes were down by the river, though her reading glasses were safely on her head, as was her Asbo's tag round her ankle.
I felt like a salmon fighting its way upstream as lashings of warm soapsuds poured over me. I'd not say I was exactly waterboarded, but it was close.
Is all comedy avant-garde now, when I should be tearing down political systems with my cutting satire? Do I need to have a Catholic Protestant joke? The answer to that last one is yes.
Okay, let's get going then, and you might want to have a Wikipedia page or Google ready for some of the Belfast landmarks mentioned in this story, in case you're not familiar with them. It came from Karen Gibson, and she told it at our July event in the Black Box, when the theme was fire. It was her first time at the 10 by 9 mic, though you'd never know it. Take it away, Karen.
I don't need a whole fire engine. Just one fireman with a bucket of water would do it. I'd knock on someone's door, but it's nearly 3 a.m. and I don't want to scare anyone. These words are a direct quote from one of my first 999 calls in the period of my life that I like to refer to as my Good Samaritan phase. Lo and behold, within 5 minutes, a full fire crew and a fire engine with blue lights flashing arrived to put out a small fire on a tarpaulin, which was across a partially built wall at the end of a fancy private road off the Malone Road. I often drive past the wall and reflect on their overreaction. A bucket of water would definitely have done the job. After the late night bucket incident, there were a number more events involving phone calls to the emergency services where I seemed to be the first person on the scene, including a car crash in the Ravenhill Road beside the entrance to the Ormer Park. Exiting my car, I was faced with 2 very handsome men and a young woman clearly in shock and bleeding from her nose. One gentleman had a huge egg-sized bump on his head from the impact against the passenger window. The other was an off-duty doctor who had also seen the accident and stopped to help. We all seemed to congregate near the front of my fairly new, at the time, Fiat 500. The doctor explained that the young lady needed to sit down somewhere while he checked her over. It would need to be the front of my nearly new Fiat 500. Did I mention it was new? My hesitation must have been obvious as the doctor looked at me strangely. My internal dialogue whirled. At least the seats were red. Maybe the blood wouldn't be too obvious. The most memorable and thought-provoking event from this period, however, has to be the time I was driving home from dinner out in the city centre. I'll set the scene. I'd been shopping earlier that day and bought myself a lovely new padded, long-in-length winter coat. I was wearing it on the drive home as I passed Musgrave Police Station, turned right past Nola with the Hula, and there in the middle of the streets, at the traffic lights, was a lady. Now, this was no ordinary lady in the middle of the road in the city centre at 11 p.m. at night. This lady was wearing absolutely nothing, not one article of clothing. As we know at this point, I was not unaccustomed to phoning emergency services. I pulled over, dialed 999, and despite having just passed Musgrave Station, I refrained from telling my emergency services operator that they could just send one police officer on foot with a large blanket. But I'll be honest, the thought did cross my mind. With my new emergency call placed and help on its way, I was now faced with a new problem to solve: what to do with a naked lady. Discussion with said lady provided no solution. The lady seemed quite unaware that she had misplaced her clothing and in fact also seemed not to be that bothered about it despite the chilly weather. Inspecting the inside of my car to see what I might be able to use to keep her warm was not fruitful. It was then that I realised the only thing I had to offer this unfortunate lady was my pride and joy, my brand new coat. Fear not. I had learned from my previous hesitations when a lady is in need, new cars or coats need to be sacrificed. Now, before anyone thinks that my halo needs a wee polish, I should let you in on a detail that I left out earlier. Whilst enjoying my pad thai at Wagamama's earlier that evening, I had reached into my new coat pocket to find a tissue. As he attempted to zip up the pocket, I realised that the zip was broken. Obviously, at the time, I was gutted. My lovely new coat was no longer perfect and would need to be returned. Little did I know that this detail would become the linchpin in my sacrificial generosity towards said naked lady just a few hours later. Somehow I managed to convince her to put on my coat. We established that her clothes were down by the river, though her reading glasses were safely on her head, as was her Asbo's tag round her ankle. The emergency services arrived and provided her with a foil blanket, and my now not-so-lovely coat was given back to me. Needless to say, I returned the coat to the shop the next day, citing the faulty zip as the problem, and received a replacement. I may have left out that a naked lady had been wearing it the night before, and I do still feel a little bit guilty about that to this day. As I relayed the story to my mum and sister-in-law a short time later, we were all in agreement. From that point forwards, and for years afterwards, and may I suggest that you all consider doing the same yourselves, we carried a blanket in our cars, referring to them affectionately as our naked lady blankets. Also useful for protecting seats from bleeding casualties, though thankfully it has never been needed again.
Karen, thanks so much. You were brilliant. Please come back soon with more. Now, some of you may have noticed that Karen's story was relatively short. People often say to me, "Oh, I couldn't speak for 10 minutes." And I tell them, I don't want you to speak for 10 minutes. That's your limit, not your target. So sometimes less is more, as Karen so brilliantly illustrated. And if, like Karen, you want to tell your story at 10 by 9, the process is simple. Check out the themes on the website, then send your story through the submissions page. I'll give you feedback and help you make it the best it can be. If you're nervous, please don't worry. Nerves are good. A recent storyteller, Bernie MacDonald, emailed me to say, "My legs were shaking behind the podium, but a black box audience lifts you and holds you. Wishing you to do well. It is a great feeling." I agree completely, Bernie. Okay, here's our second story, and it comes from Mary Farrell. Mary is a miracle of nature and a great supporter of 10 by 9, especially when we travel to the northwest and the north coast. She told this story at our Halloween event in Limavady, and it features much scarier things than ghosts.
Halloween is traditionally a time of ghost stories. But although the following event will haunt me for some time, it falls more under the heading of a horror story, also traditional fare at this time of year. Ironically, I was trying to avoid one horrific situation, but instead ended up in another, on holiday in Turkey last May. A day out was suggested, going on a nature trek through a beautiful mountain gorge. This appealed until I realised that part of this trek involved wading through an ice-cold river. The prospect of freezing water up to my knees for a mile was not for me. I wanted something more befitting my femininity, not risking hypothermia and the loss of a foot. So I looked for an alternative way of passing the day on my own. My options became limited when, on the day before, a very warm but cloudy, hazy day, I got sunburnt. I hear sympathetic murmurs from the crowd, from those who have also in their time been roasted. But no, this horror story is not about sunburn. Looking like a cross between a barber's pole and a stick of strawberry rock, I wanted to do something on that day that would be soothing to my skin. So I booked in for the Turkish bath treatment in the hotel spa. Goldilocks-like, I thought, yes, that'll be just right for the lobster-like body I now had. Now, what did I expect from this procedure? Soothing balm on my cracked skin, a gentle kneading of my poor scorched body, all resulting in a calm, relaxed state. Yes, people, Stephen King knows full well the value of an unexpected twist when producing a true horror story. It all started so well. I was ushered into the spa by a slender Balinese lass, Audrey Hepburnesque in her gracefulness. Dainty fingers, I noticed, a gentle smile. Yes, this was for me. Shepherded into a locker room, I was instructed to take all my clothes off and put on the robe, underpants and slippers provided, all made of a fine tissue-like paper. And this is where things started to go wrong. The ties on the robe were impossible to fasten without leaving large areas of my naked body open to full view. Well, might you shudder, I agree, not a pretty sight for you to imagine. Also, the one-size-fits-all knickers were destined for a woman even larger than I. Gravity slid them kneeward every time I moved. But the slippers were the worst problem. At least size 15 and elasticated to infinity. In trying to get from one side of the locker room to another, I resembled somebody auditioning for Dancing on Ice. Clutching the coverings around me as best I could with only 2 arms, I skated out into the main treatment room. To begin, the first 5 minutes you'll spend in the steam room, she informed me, wearing her sweet smile. Now, before this, my knowledge of steam rooms was based solely on images from the Godfather films, where gangster deals were negotiated with scantily clad men wearing strategically draped towels. Better informed now, I have no idea how they did any business at all, as it was all so hot and wet and steamy that after 5 minutes my senses had curled up and melted, and I could no longer form a coherent thought. Staggering out like someone befuddled after a heavyweight prize fight, I was led to the next room, which contained a marble sarcophagus-like table with steps leading up to it and basins of water and containers of soap on a shelf at the side. Starting to worry a little by this stage, I briefly wondered if this sarcophagus was where they hid the bodies of those who had collapsed in the sauna. Lie down on your back on the top slab, she said, deftly whipping off my robe and guiding me up the steps. As she began to flannel wash me, I reassessed. This was not what I had expected from a Turkish bath treatment. Far too much water, far too few scented oils. I felt like a salmon fighting its way upstream as lashings of warm soapsuds poured over me. I'd not say I was exactly waterboarded, but it was close. Stephen King, thou should have been taking notes at that hour. Your next bestseller was writing itself in that room. Thinking the situation could not become more horrific, I was so wrong. The exfoliation began, and more exfoliation, and even more exfoliation, and indeed exfoliation in places where I hadn't believed I even had skin to exfoliate. She rubbed my body with a glove I wouldn't exactly compare to a wire steel brush. But every so often, after covering a square foot or so, she'd delight in holding it up to show me. Each time I expected it to be covered with strips of flesh and skin. At one point, she reassured me I would lose at least 2 pounds of my body weight with this treatment. I tried to look on the bright side, telling myself, out with the diets, in with a weekly regime of these, if only I could find a Turkish spa back on the Northern Irish coast. She then asked me, in her tinkling Asian way, to turn over. Now, despite everything, I was feeling somewhat relaxed now, So I assumed I'd flick over deftly with the speed of a racing snake. Damn the bit. She took to rocking me from side to side with increasing force, trusting that at some point gravitation would catch the curve and I'd wallop over. Despite an increase in sideways momentum, after a while I feared a desperate emergency call to a forklift truck company. Not to be beaten, she gritted her teeth, seized the slab cover from under me, and yanked it to her swiftly, like a magician removing a tablecloth from under cutlery and plates. It worked. I found myself facing downwards on the slab. For the sake of the sensitive in the audience, I'll pass over the washing and exfoliating of my rear side. Suffice it to say, my senses numbed to a point where she could have given me a colonoscopy. And I wouldn't have felt a thing. She then proceeded to whip my arms up past my ears in a full extension and stretched my legs out wide to a balletic point I never thought they could reach. If it had been a yoga position, it would have been called the rack. She then changed technique. At some point in my life, I had heard how many vertebrae I had in my spine, but I never thought I'd make the acquaintance of each one personally, as they were individually washed. Throughout all of this entire procedure, the fixed smile on her pretty face probably disguised the fact that she was thinking, "Dear God, please next time send me a thin one. I should charge by the square footage." I may have passed out, but she suddenly whispered, "That's it, you're done," moving away to turn off an orange alarm clock I'd not seen on the shelf beside me. Exhausted by the earlier failure of the rocking manoeuvres in shifting me, she now adopted a different approach. Grabbing me by the ankles, she slid me to the end of the slab and cantilevered me upwards until I stood upright. Briskly whipping up wet towels from around the slab, no doubt blood splattered, she smiled, pointed to the door leading back to the locker room, and speedily left. This woman, who knew more about my nooks and crannies than any other person on the face of the earth, was gone without even exchanging phone numbers. As I walked back up the hill to my hotel room with the afternoon muezzin calls from the mosque in the nearby town in my ears, I mused on passing ships, cleansed pores, and above all, my now absent 2 pounds of exfoliated skin. How shallow am I? I feel it was almost worth it, now that the scars have nearly healed. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mary. I felt every scrape of that wire brush, or whatever torture implement it was. Great to have you back at 10 by 9. Now, as always, just a quick thank you to everyone who helps keep 10 by 9 going with donations. Some of you give via Patreon, and some of you donate to StoryPig at our live events. Either way, thank you. 10 by 9 is always free and always will be, so it really helps to keep us going. Okay, let's continue with the stories, and here's our third and final addition to this podcast. It too was told at Halloween in Limavady. Here's Mike Carlisle.
Fear is the mind killer, or so Frank Herbert reckons anyway. I felt like my mind had died 4 years ago when I had a mental breakdown and I was full of fear. I'd seen breakdowns portrayed in movies and heard people talk about anxiety attacks, so I thought I had some idea of what it entailed. I was wrong. It came about due to too many pressures building up and being a then 40-year-old Irish man having no systems in place to identify or deal with any of it. And it manifested as I was laying the table for dinner. Just as I was setting down the final fork, just as the stainless steel was about to make contact with the solid wood, because we're quite middle class, just as the stellar coordinated cutlery set brushed the Laura Ashley oak dining table with the Orakili place settings and the Denby tableware, out came what can only be described as emotional projectile vomit. I will save you my verbal impression of this, but it was nasty. I could not stop crying and had to run outside to get some fresh air because that's what they did in the movies. I was terrified. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. As you can imagine, I decided that I did not enjoy this experience and decided I would never let it happen again. So I got myself a therapist. I did all the things that you're supposed to do when you're dealing with mental health issues. All of them were helpful. During one session, my therapist asked, "What do you do for fun just for yourself?" I thought for a long moment and replied, "The other day I repainted our fence while listening to a podcast." She gave me a look that said, "That is the wrong answer, Mike." And she gave me a task. I was described 3 lists: what I used to enjoy doing, what I currently enjoy doing, and what I really wanted to do in the future, near or far. I did as I was told, but when I got to the what I really wanted to do in the future, near or far, I had a pressing thought that wouldn't go away. Stand-up comedy. I'd always loved stand-up, but I always thought of it as something that other people did. I had actually written some stand-up in my 20s, but just as a form of creative release, it was buzzing around in my head and I had to get it out, but I had no intention of doing anything with it. Why was this coming back into my mind now? I had no idea, but I knew I wanted to do it. I had approached all of my mental recovery with 100% effort and decided that if I don't write stand-up on the list, or if I do write it and then don't do it, then I'm holding back. I'd never been to a comedy club in my life, so I Googled Comedy Club Northern Ireland. I clicked the first link, which read Monday Night Comedy Club, and sent this message. "Hey, I'm looking to do stand-up. I was wondering how I book a slot, and do I need to prove myself worthy?" 4 days later, I had booked a 5-minute slot at a newcomer's night, and 2 weeks later, I was walking into the Pavilion Bar on the Ormo Road with no idea of what I was letting myself in for. Is all comedy avant-garde now? Will I be shunned for making jokes about planets being smelly when I should be tearing down political systems with my cutting satire? Do I need to have a Catholic Protestant joke? The answer to that last one is yes. I walked in the door and was told by a man who has become a good friend, "You're last in the bill. I hope that's okay." I was not okay. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I sat through the first half watching 5 acts try and make a room full of strangers laugh for the very first time. As I was watching, my nerves dissipated. Every act was fine. They all got some laughs. They all failed to get all of the laughs. Some spoke too quickly. Some clearly hadn't rehearsed enough, but they were fine. I thought to myself, I'm definitely at least as good as these guys. And I was feeling confident, and I started to relax. Then the second half kicked off. More of the same. Everybody was doing okay. The penultimate act walked towards the stage. It was a young man who had sat in the corner all night, not talking to anyone, looking completely bathed in panic. He reached the stage. I was still feeling confident. He opened with some insightful self-depreciation. We all laughed. He made a hilarious observation about the room. We all laughed. He made a witty comment about his Catholic upbringing. We all laughed. He told a quick anecdote about his brother. Everyone laughed, except me. Another joke. They are all laughing. Another gag. They keep laughing. I am on after this guy, and he is killing it. I started to panic. I did my deep breathing techniques my therapist taught me. The laughs are becoming sustained cries in the darkened room. I tell myself I can do this. I've spoken in public countless times. This is just another time. Except it's to complete strangers and I have to make them laugh. They stop to applaud his hilarious TV show pitch idea. I need to get out of here. I can't do this. I don't need to do this. No one's here to see me. No one knows I'm doing this. No one would be in any way worse if I just run out of the building and pretend this never happened. Except me, because I would be choosing not to do this. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. His 5 minute comes to an end with more applause than any act by far. Now it's my turn. I go up on stage and I recite my 5 minutes that took me 20 hours to write and commit to memory. I wish the next line of this retelling was, and I was amazing. But the truth is, I was fine. I got some laughs. I failed to get all the laughs. I made it through. I got some applause at the end of my first 5 minutes of comedy. There was no rush of endorphins, no light from above pointing at me, other than the spotlights on the stage. But as I walked to the back of the room, I knew this. I like this. I want to do this again. So I did. Since that day, I have gigged with Shane Todd, Dino Docherty, and Serena Terry. I have at times kept audiences bursting with laughter. I have played to 10 minutes of silence in return for my efforts on other days. I have told jokes to no audience other than the other comedians on the bill. I have entertained audiences of 250 paying customers. I've played queer spaces. I played at church. I played charity benefits and children's festivals, outdoor gigs, indoor gigs, paid gigs, free gigs, mostly free gigs. I've opened and I've headlined. After one gig, myself, a Buddhist and a non-binary person shared a meal together at the bottom of Waterloo Street, and we had a great conversation about my faith in Christ. Comedy has brought me into a whole new world. And one day I was talking to a very good friend about putting together an hour of comedy to perform. But I didn't know how to go about that. And that's when we come to this very room. He suggested putting it on here. I went home and I talked it through with my wife. She wisely asked me the challenging question, why would you not do it? What's the worst outcome? I paused and I replied, 20 friends buy tickets, and then I have to perform to a basically empty room for an hour while they pity me thinking I failed? She looked at me surprised and said, you have never before allowed fear to stop you doing anything. I don't think you should start now. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is a little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn my inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. It's booked. On March 13th of next year, I will be performing an hour of comedy in this very room. I will be very afraid. You're all invited. Please come.
Best wishes, Mike, for that rather scary adventure. I have no doubt you'll be brilliant. And thanks to you for giving me the title for this podcast, Little Death. Though I think that means something quite different to the French. And that's it for this podcast. You can keep up with all our upcoming events and themes by having a look at our website, that is 10by9.com. Plan your 2026 visit to the Black Box if you've not been yet. All the dates are there and we're adding more all the time. 10by9 is on the socials naturally. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook and or Instagram. And you can get in touch via email at 10by9belfast@gmail.com. I love hearing from you. Thanks to everyone who helps make 10by9 happen. I really appreciate all the help, whether it's at the Black Box, in Port Stewart, Limavady, or wherever. Thanks to our fantastic 10by9 audiences. You make everyone feel so supported, including me, as Bernie said in her email. And thanks to all the people who have shared their story at 10by9, but especially Karen Gibson, Mary Farrell, and Mike Carlisle. I'm Paul Dorn, and I'll be back with another podcast soon. But for now, bye-bye.